You know, there are moments in history that act like a dividing line, a point so catastrophic that the world before it is just unrecognizable from the world that comes after. This is the story of maybe the greatest of those moments. It's the story of a killer that managed to stay a mystery for more than 600 years, the Black Death.
It didn't arrive like an invading army. It came as a pestilence, moving silently along the great trade routes, an invisible passenger that would bring an entire continent to its knees. This isn't just a story about a plague. It's a story of how humanity stared directly into the abyss and somehow found a way to survive.
To really grasp the level of devastation, we first have to understand the world it struck. 14th century Europe, well, it wasn't a world of strength. It was a world teetering on the edge, already weak, already starving. It was a world perfectly primed for a catastrophe. See, for years before the plague even arrived, Europe was already suffering. In 1315, a huge famine started. Rains just wouldn't stop wiping out harvests. Then, a disease swept through the livestock, killing off the animals people relied on for food. So you had an entire generation growing up malnourished, their bodies just not having the strength to fight off anything. When the Black Death finally showed up in 1347, it didn't find a healthy population. It found one that was already on its knees.
The horror of what happened next it's almost impossible to comprehend. An Italian chronicler at the time, Giovanni Villani, he described its terrifying speed. People would just start spitting blood, their bodies shaking with fever, and death came fast, sometimes in just a few days. But the truly cruel part, it was unbelievably contagious. Think about that. To simply care for a sick loved one was to basically sign your own death warrant.
The final toll was apocalyptic, 60%. Just let that number sink in. In just a handful of years, as much as 60% of the entire population of Europe was just gone. Entire towns and villages simply emptied out, becoming ghost towns. The living couldn't keep up with burying the dead. It was a void, a chasm, from which it seemed the world could never, ever recover.
And yet, after all that, a huge mystery remained. Everybody knew the devastation it caused, but for more than 600 years, no one could say for sure who the killer was. The greatest mass murderer in human history had somehow left behind no fingerprints.
Now, there was a prime suspect, of course, a bacterium called Yersinia pestis, the one we know causes bubonic plague. But for centuries, that's all it was, a theory. Early attempts to find it in the bodies of victims all failed. It was the ultimate cold case with a ghost for a suspect.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How in the world do you run a forensic investigation when your crime scene is 6 centuries old? How do you find the microscopic traces of a killer that should have turned to dust a long, long time ago? Well, that was the incredible challenge facing a new team of scientists.
The answer, it turned out, wouldn't be found in some dusty old book. No, the answer was hidden in the remains of the victims themselves. A new generation of scientific detectives, they began a quest to find the killer's DNA, locked deep inside medieval bones.
Their search led them to this exact spot, a mass grave in London that was dug in 1348, with this sort of chilling foresight as the plague was closing in on the city. This place, East Smithfield, is so important because it's the only cemetery that we can say with 100% certainty was created just for victims of the Black Death. This was ground zero. If the evidence was anywhere, it had to be here.
Now, the key to this whole investigation wasn't the bone, which is too porous. It was the teeth. You see, a tooth's hard enamel acts like a perfect little time capsule, protecting the soft pulp inside from centuries of contamination. So the scientists carefully drilled into that pulp chamber and pulled out this microscopic swamp of ancient DNA. And in that swamp was the victim's DNA, DNA from the soil, and they hoped, just maybe, the DNA of the killer itself. The lead scientist, Hendrik Poinar, put the challenge into perspective. He said, it's like trying to find one grain of sand in a giant football field. So this wasn't just a needle in a haystack problem. The odds were, frankly, almost impossible. For more than a year, they worked, sifting through that genetic swamp, piece by piece. And they were getting close to a breakthrough, a discovery that would finally solve this ancient mystery and completely change how we think about disease. And then, they found it. Tiny, broken strands of DNA. And they were a perfect match for one thing and one thing only: Yersinia pestis. That was it. For the first time in history, they had definitive, undeniable proof. After 600 years, they had their killer. Case closed.
But just identifying the killer wasn't the end of it. The team then tried to do something that had never, ever been done before. They wanted to rebuild the killer's entire genetic blueprint. The challenge here was just massive. I mean, the DNA fragments they were finding were tiny, some as short as 50 letters, and they had to piece them together to build a complete genome that was 4.6 million letters long.
When they finally did it, they made an absolutely stunning discovery. They compared the ancient killer's genome to the version of Yersinia pestis that's around today, and they weren't identical. They found 97 genetic mutations. This means the bacteria that caused the Black Death is a different beast entirely from its modern descendant. And somewhere in those 97 changes lies the secret to why it was so incredibly virulent.
So, solving this ancient mystery wasn't just some academic exercise. It actually holds really important lessons for us right now, for our present and for our future. Because it turns out the killer's descendant, well, it never really went away. The plague is still with us. Its modern form infects thousands of people around the world every single year. And while we have antibiotics that can treat it, if you catch it early, it's still an incredibly dangerous disease, a dormant echo of its devastating ancestor.
But maybe the plague's most lasting legacy was social. It was a brutal but indiscriminate social leveler. It didn't care if you were rich or poor. Before the plague, your life was pretty much set from birth. But after, with so few workers left, the survivors could suddenly demand higher wages. The rigid structure of the feudal system just began to crack, and that opened up new opportunities for everyone.
I mean, the world was completely remade. The old feudal system shattered. For the first time, laborers had real power. People were forced to innovate just to get by. And yes, the culture became obsessed with death, the whole memento mori, remember you will die theme. But amid all that darkness, you also find these incredible stories of resilience, of communities holding together in the face of the apocalypse.
The Black Death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a crucible that forged our modern world, and its story, literally etched into the DNA of its victims, is this chilling reminder of just how vulnerable we really are, and it forces us to ask a really important question. Now that we've looked into the abyss of the past, what have we really learned for the pandemic that we all know is still to come?